we start off every service with prayers, and I don't know about you, but often when I hear on the news when there's been some tragedy or disaster, whoever the official is that's holding a press conference or talking to people will say, our thoughts and prayers go to the families and their victims. And when they say our thoughts and prayers go wherever, my experience of that is oftentimes it feels flat. Like, I wonder, are they actually praying? Maybe some of them are, but I don't know if they are. I think sometimes that's just something that people say. And my experience of prayer has evolved throughout my life. I was not raised with a religion, so I didn't grow up with prayer. And when I was very young, I think 5, I was in kindergarten, and I think I've told this story before, so some of you may have heard it. There was a little boy in the class who was playing with the dollhouse in the classroom. That was this amazing, beautiful dollhouse, and he got so bullied and so ridiculed because he was a boy, and at that time boys did not play with dolls. And I remember feeling so bad for him and not knowing what to do about it, and I couldn't even sleep. I was lying in bed crying and feeling so bad for him. And this thought welled up within me, thank God I'm a girl, because girls can do everything. Girls can play with dolls, they can play with trucks, they can climb trees, they can wear pants, they can wear dresses, but boys can only do the boy stuff. They can't do the girl stuff. At least that's how it was in the early 60s when I was in kindergarten. And so when I had this thought, thank God I'm a girl, then I did this kind of double take in my 5-year-old mind thinking, wait a minute, I don't believe in God, because I wasn't raised to believe in God. So where did that come from? You know, where did that uprising of gratitude toward God come from? And that was a pretty life-changing event for me. And it set me on a quest that I wasn't very vocal about, but it was internally driven to really understand God and understand prayer. And I would say simply that prayer is talking to God, which is why I love your song, Mitzi, about having a phone. We each have a phone to God. And then meditation is when we listen to God, or listen for God's response. And in my experience, when someone is really offering a heartfelt prayer, or when I'm offering a heartfelt prayer, I can really feel the presence of the divine. And I had an experience, this has been a number of years ago. Sundragon said I was president of the School of Metaphysics. Well, I was a teacher with the School of Metaphysics for decades. And there was a time that we bought a building in Kansas City for a location for the school. And when we bought the building, the realtor assured us that within the next 2 or 3 years, that area would go commercial, because across the street was a strip mall, half a block away were stores, but where we got this place, it was a residential street. Well, it did not go commercial, and one evening there was a class, and the director of the school put a sign in the window, which a neighbor saw and complained about. And so we got this letter from the city government saying we had to cease and desist our operations because it was a residential neighborhood. So unfortunately, when I was a kid, one of the things I wanted to do was to be a lawyer. So I have had repeated experiences of having to appear before zoning boards and city councils to do all this lawyer type stuff, even though I'm not a lawyer. So anyway, we had to go before the city council to try to plead our case, basically, that we could stay operating on this residential street. And I corralled the students and the teachers in the school, and we spent at least a month, maybe more, contacting people who had been students, who had benefited from the education, and getting reference letters saying, this is why I think this school needs to exist. You know, some simple practical things, like there was a 19 or 20-year-old who was very ADHD, kept getting into traffic accidents. He had speeding tickets because his mind was all over the place. And after doing concentration exercises regularly, he slowed down, he became a responsible driver, he had no more speeding tickets. There was someone else who had been bullied because he stuttered horribly, and from him learning how to slow his mind down, he cured his stuttering, which changed his life, and actually at the time he was developing a career as a public speaker. Kind of reminded me of James Earl Jones, who also was a big stutterer. So anyway, I go into the city council. My anxiety level was like about a 15 on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the highest. Because I was so nervous. This was not about me, it was about being able to have this place that would provide education to help people. And so the fate of the school was in the hands of these people on the city council. And the meeting started with the minister giving an invocation, praying that all of the decisions that were to be made that day, it wasn't just us, there were other people on the docket. He prayed that all of the decisions that would be made that day would be guided with wisdom and would serve the higher good. I don't remember his exact words. And when he prayed that invocation, I completely got centered, my anxiety disappeared, and I knew that that was exactly true. That it wasn't so much about praying that I would get my way, but praying that whatever was in the highest and best good would happen. And so I felt calm and centered presenting our case. And I also was aware that if we didn't win, that it meant that we weren't in the right place and we needed to be in a different place. Well, as it turned out, we did win. And to me, the value of that prayer was not that we got our way, it was that it helped me to be completely centered in the wisdom of a higher power. And that's what I believe that prayer is for. So I think sometimes in our human minds, we want to tell God what we want. And I don't think that's what prayer is for. Like, you know, little kids pray for a bicycle. I know people probably pray that the Chiefs would win the Super Bowl. And I don't think that that is really the province of the divine. The physical things, the physical world, just like we each have a phone, we also have a mind to visualize, to make decisions, to put out effort. And I think that's what's in the human realm. And that what we need to be praying for is that those choices we make and the things that we do in our physical lives, that they will be guided by wisdom, that they will help promote understanding, and that they will serve the highest good. So I think sometimes when there are what we call miracles, some people absolutely know in their hearts that that came about because of prayer. Other people doubt it, like, well, maybe it would have happened anyway. And I don't think it really matters. I think what matters is that we call upon the belief, even if we don't have the knowledge, that there is some force that is greater than our individual selves. So I don't know if you saw the movie Breakthrough. I think it came out, now it's been maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago. It's based on a true story of someone in St. Louis, a teenager, who was playing with his friends on the ice, and he fell through the ice and was underneath this frozen water for 15 minutes. And they took him to the hospital. He was declared dead for another 45 minutes. So basically he was dead, according to medical science, for an hour. His mother came in and prayed. There were all hundreds of people who were praying for him, and he recovered. And he's, I think, now a minister. I know he went to school for ministry. And belief about, okay, was it the prayers that brought him back to life? Was it the life support that brought him back to life? It doesn't really matter. What matters is that when we're feeling powerless, prayer is something that we can rely upon to call upon a greater power. And that's really the nature of prayer. Hebrews says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So prayer is not something that we can really prove in a physical way, although I know people have researched it. There's a book, I don't remember the exact title, it's by a doctor named Larry Dossey, and this is, it came out some years ago, that he actually did what they call evidence-based research on people who improved with prayer or didn't improve when they didn't have prayer. And I don't know about you, but for me, that doesn't really get to me to say, well, these scientists prove that this person got better with a prayer. What's more important to me is the experience, like my experience sitting in that city council meeting, feeling completely centered and calm when the presence of the divine was invoked. Anytime that people feel powerless, prayer is a good option, because it gives us a way to communicate our desires and to expect that there's something that maybe we're not just getting. And so rather than praying for a specific physical outcome, I think it works much better if we pray, for example, for forgiveness. Now, I don't know about you, but there are some things in my life that sometimes I have a hard time forgiving myself for. I loved my mother, and I know she loved me, but we had kind of a troubled relationship. And sometimes when I think about me and how I related to her, I was kind of mean to her sometimes and not very understanding. And she passed away 25 years ago now, so I can't talk to her and say, I'm sorry and I love you, but I can pray that I am forgiven, and that somewhere in the cosmic realm that she understands all that, which I believe, even though I don't always feel that. So when I don't feel that, that's when I pray for forgiveness. And in fact, if you're interested in reading prayers from all religions, this is a fantastic little book. It's called The Gift of Prayer. And she gave this to me when I became ordained as a minister. And she was a very anti-religious person. She was raised in a strict Orthodox Jewish family, and as a teenager, she went completely the opposite direction. And so for her to give me a book about prayer when she was probably troubled in her own way about the fact that I was becoming a minister, because that was, is this the daughter I raised? So I think on some level, we both really wanted to understand each other, and the forgiveness prayers helped me to believe that. Another kind of prayer that's really powerful that we always include in these services is prayers of gratitude. And there's a kind of funny saying I've heard that an atheist's biggest problem is when they feel grateful but they don't have anyone to thank. So it's kind of like my little self thanking God for being a girl. And then there are the prayers of supplication, which is asking for what we want. And as I said, I think that what we need to ask for is understanding, peace, forgiveness, the things that promote our soul growth and our spiritual progression rather than the things in our physical lives. Because the things in our physical lives are up to us to create. And the purpose of those things in our physical lives are the understanding, the growth, the development, the learning, which is what I believe the passage in the Bible means that says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. That Caesar was the physical ruler, So when we're looking at physical things, that's for us to do physically. When we're looking at the metaphysical or above the physical things like understanding, comfort, peace, awareness, that those are the things that are of divine origin. And I think one of the ways that this is maybe, I was going to say easy, and I don't know it's easy, but one of the more obvious ways to see that is when we're looking at prayers of healing. So many of us, maybe most of us, have had someone in our life who has had serious physical problems, illness, maybe dying, and if we pray for their recovery, that's usually because that's what we want. It's not necessarily what they want. And I don't know about you, but I know of at least a few people who went through extreme medical procedures. They went to ERs a number of times. They got saved by the medical establishment, and then they came home and they fell and hit their head and then died of a brain bleed or something like that. And I'm not saying this to be morbid, but I believe that when those things happen, it's because the soul inside that body is really ready to go, and they find a way to go. And I'm very grateful that nowadays in the medical community, there are medical directives that people can sign to say, I want these procedures, I don't want these procedures. When I was a kid and my father had cancer, they didn't have things like that. So sometimes the extreme medical procedures can be kind of gruesome. And I think it's up to the soul who's in the body to decide, do I want this or not? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the procedures. What I am saying is that when we are praying, to pray for wholeness, you know, the word wholeness, the word health, the word holiness, they all come from the same root. That's what we should be praying for, is for wholeness and whatever is in the divine order to happen. A really kind of amazing example to me of this is how Mother Teresa died. She's actually declared a saint, so I guess she would be called Saint Teresa. So I don't know how much you know about Mother Teresa. She dedicated her life to serving the poorest of the poor in India, and near the very end of her life, she had extreme respiratory difficulties, and they came in with a machine to support her breathing, and they hooked her up to the machine, and then there was a power failure that lasted a minute, enough for the machine to stop working, and she died when the machine stopped working. Now, I don't know about you, but this woman who dedicated her entire life to serving God and helping other people through serving God, I firmly believe that somewhere her phone to God was saying, could you please have them let me die? You know, we don't know. So that's where the belief that there is a divine order is important and centering. And to me, that is the power of prayer. So I do want to say one last thing. There are many prayers that someone has already made up and worded for you. And some of those, thousands, maybe millions of people pray around the world, like the Lord's Prayer, there are Hindu prayers, the Hail Mary, and part of the power of those prayers is the energy and the consciousness of so many people around the world who pray them, sometimes all at the same time. I stayed for a while, for about 10 days, in a retreat center that's run by a small group of Catholic nuns who basically have devoted their lives to prayer and silence. And they prayed the Liturgy of the Hours, which are regular times throughout the day that they pray prayers that are in a prayer book. And I joined them for it. I wasn't raised Catholic. And it was amazing to me to be able to, I mean, this was a small group, like maybe 8 nuns, but I felt the thousands of prayers around the world all being prayed at the same time. So that's one way to pray. Another way is to make up your own prayer, to have a conversation with the divine, just like you would have a conversation with a friend. So, however you pray, or maybe if you don't have prayer as part of your regular practice, I would encourage you to experiment and explore with whatever prayers connect you with that higher power.